Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you. I'm so glad you all coming in. Don't think that I'm going to do this many shows in one day. But we've had a great time. We've had a great time as we talked with Reverend Dr. Michael Dyson about really about the Harris campaign, black men in the campaign, President Obama, just how people are being perceived, received. Tremendous conversations that we have had. And of course, today, as I'm recording this, it's Indigenous Peoples Day. And so I'm certainly uh, sending love and respect and honor to the people whose land we occupy, the indigenous people of the Americas. And many of them speak Spanish now. Many of them speak Spanish now. And many of us have their blood coursing through our veins. But this is their land, and this should be their day. And it is their day. And I'm so pleased that they are being recognized and acknowledged because this is their land. This land was and is their land. And we won't be right until we make things right with the indigenous people of this hemisphere. So sending so much love, honor, and respect to the indigenous peoples. There you go. Remember, Columbus got lost. An explorer who was lost, and he's honored for being lost. Oh, Daryl Jones. There another transformative justice coalition. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? You know it does.
It does.
you know, look, I'm going to keep it 100 here with you all. Look, this sounds crazy. That having been said, we got some crazy stories for you with voting, and I promise you we will bring a voters clinic, and we're going to have several more of these, Daryl, leading up to the election because we're only 2.5, 3 weeks away from it. And many people are now voting early, and they're running into issues. Or there are issues that you might run into because more and more people, individuals are being paid by larger groups to have you stricken from the voter rolls. If they challenge your place of residence, if they challenge any aspect of your viability to vote, you will be stricken from the voter rolls. That's how these people are playing the game now. Hey, Mike, how you doing, sweetie? So he says, switch black to a third political party. I'm not mad at you, honey. I'm not mad at you. Bless your heart. But it's not just, remember, it's not just a third political party or a fourth or a fifth one. What will they stand for? Remember that. Remember that. I mean, I hear you. I believe that we should not have binary choices. I don't think that that's fair. And it's not democratic, quite frankly. In England, you have all kinds of choices, and all around the world, you have lots and lots of choices. You have choices. Now we have option A and option B. And if we really believe in a democracy and if we want to strengthen the republic, we've got to have choices. But in the meantime, you need to have the vote. And that's why October 21st, we will be at Rainbow Push. Greg Palast will be our special guest. He's a member of the family now. He will be in Chicago at Rainbow Push at 930 East 50th Street. And we will be showing his movie, Vigilantes, Inc. If you have any doubt about the vote, when you see this movie, you will be fired up about voting because he takes you all the way back to the pre-slavery period and shows you how people have been working overtime to keep everybody from voting, Black people in particular. But remember, white folks who did not have property did not have the right to vote. It has never been the plan for people. Hello, Carol. Hello, Jarvis. It's never been the plan for everybody to be able to vote. Thus the hurdles. Thus the people in Georgia are not going to get any special dispensation to vote, even though they have had 2 hurricanes. What's going to happen in North Carolina? These should be the conversations that we're having in media. And we're going to have that here today. But we're also going to talk about what happens when you go to the polls if you find out that you're not registered anymore. What do you do? What do you do if you have visual problems? Do you have the right to have someone walk into the poll with you? What happens if you struggle with literacy? That's no shame in that. A lot of people do.
Hmm.
You have the right to bring someone with you. But you know what? We're going to confirm all of this with Daryl Jones, the chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition. He and Barbara Arnwine and their team are heading down to Georgia, which will really be ground zero for the election mischief. But look at North Carolina, look at Wisconsin, look everywhere because it is everywhere. Everybody like and share the show, like and share the show, like and share the show, like and share the show. And of course, every Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on WOLDC, the Radio One network, yes?
Yes.
If you go to Radio One, if you go to WOLDC, you can hear their show, and I'm sure you can hear archived shows.
Hmm.
Attorney Barbara Arnwine and Daryl Jones between barbaraarnwine.com, ARNWINE.com, and WOLDC. You ought to be able to hear these shows. Your vote, you don't realize how important it is until someone tells you that you can't do it. And
Hmm.
until the election time, we should be talking about the Electoral College and all of these election issues in the years leading up to the election. But here we are once again in a race that where every vote matters, Daryl Jones. I mean, we're hearing before we get into these particulars of how to vote and all of that, they're saying that this race is tighter than this, that
Hmm.
it is a margin of error race. I've never heard them put it that way before. What does that mean?
Yeah. You know, when you're within the margin of error, they have all the polls to do all the predictions, and they say, it's within, 3 or 4 point margin of error. So when they call it a margin of error race, they're saying that all the polls, and it's primarily the battleground states that you're looking at, that you're considering when you talk about the marginal races. You're saying that all these battleground states, for the most part, are within that margin of error of the poll, that it could go either way. It's really a 50-50, a flip of the coin as to how the election will turn out. Who gets their base out? If it's bad weather, who turns out? Particularly if it's just an election day issue. But Santita, the one thing, because as you know, we're taping this on Indigenous Peoples Day. I wanted to just take a moment to be certain that people understand the special issues and vulnerabilities that the Native Americans face when they're trying to vote. And people just take it for granted. But let me tell you, one of the things that happen on a lot of the tribal lands where they're located is that they don't have an address, a physical address that they can put. They have PO boxes, but
Mhm.
not a box, not a mailbox. And so a lot of times in many states, it makes it more difficult for them to receive the absentee ballot in order for them to be able to cast their ballots. Once they receive the ballots, the question becomes, how do they go through the process of casting that ballot? They don't have a mailbox. And where the post office is located generally is miles away on these tribal lands that they have to go to. So it presents really special issues for them when it comes time to cast ballots. And people say, well, why don't they just go and vote like everybody else? Same issue, right? On the tribal lands, there are miles between neighbors, miles from polling locations, and generally a lot of them don't have vehicles. They don't have the ability to just get in and traveling and go. So there's special issues that are presented for the Native American voter. So a lot of states, Arizona for one, and Nevada being another, they present all of these other roadblocks when it comes to the Native Americans being able to vote, making it easily and accessible. Even when we're talking about the exact name matches and all this other stuff, that makes it's like an overwhelming difficulty roadblock that's put in place for that Native American voter. Don't even talk about having to come back and try to recast a ballot or find or cure a ballot that has an error in it. It just creates a big roadblock for the Native American voter and what they're going through. So I want us to always keep that in mind when we're talking about the voting rights and voting rights in general. But when we get into some of the issues that
Well, hold on. But by bringing that up, if you don't mind, you bring up another excuse me, population. Those people who are working class and poor, those
Mhm,
people who live in parks,
absolutely.
and people who are homeless.
Hmm.
Do you, if you're homeless, can you vote? if you live in a park, can you vote? I mean, because more and more Americans, and they're not say living in trailer parks per se, they're you're almost like the Paul McCartney and Wings song "Band on the Run."
Mhm.
People are having a lot of people live in their cars. I mean, what do you do?
Well, absolutely, Santita, and it's based upon the state because states control the vote for all of its citizens. If you are unhoused or homeless, you still have the right to vote. The statement that I like to roll out is that just because you've lost your home does not mean you've lost your vote, and you haven't. And so the question is, well, how does a person without a home vote? How does a person without a fixed address vote? And it varies state by state. A lot of states, what happens is
Mhm.
that the person that is unhoused is able to use certain addresses, right, for a state building or a federal building or some type of address like that, a government address that they can use where they can collect their mail, and they can use that as the place for their vote to get their voting information and to be able to access the ability to vote. A lot of states, some states even have crossroads that you can use. You don't have a physical address, but you're between 59th and L. That's where you are. That's where you can be found. That can be your residence. That can be your place to vote. Simply because you are unhoused does not mean you lose the right to vote. You always have that right to vote, even if you're unhoused. And it's interesting you raise it because one of the things that we just came off the road and doing in Pittsburgh as well as in Cincinnati is that we were visiting folks that were in homeless shelters because they're there temporarily, but they have the right to vote. They can still register and they can vote. Many of the shelters will allow residents to use that address to receive mail and to be able to vote. All of that is legal. It goes state by state, so you got to be careful with the state that you're in. But simply because you're unhoused does not mean you lose that right to vote, Santita.
Where do you get this information?
And that's one of the trickier parts. The best place to get the information is at vote.org. If you have access to the computer, you can go to vote.org and they'll give you the information on homeless and being able to vote. You can also go to the National Coalition for Homelessness, National Coalition for the Homeless. They have that information on their site with regards to folks being able to vote that are unhoused. You can, those are the two greatest sources of information. You can also, if you just want to go someplace locally, you can go to your local board of elections and they will have that information. You could call them and they should be able to provide you the information on how you're able to vote if you're unhoused. And for people that are wondering, a lot of unhoused people still have a cell phone. They still have the ability to communicate with people. And that also goes for people because oftentimes when we think of someone being homeless or unhoused, we think of them being on the streets, living in crates or cartons or whatever. That's not always the situation. There's also housing insecurity, meaning that you're couch surfing. You're going from relative to relative to find a place to lay your head to rest. That's considered unhoused. You don't have a permanent residence. You're moving around. So those individuals also would fit in that into that caveat of being able to register to vote using a government address if that's available in the state and the jurisdiction where you're residing. But simply because you're housing insecure or don't have housing, you don't lose that right to vote, Santita.
We're talking with Attorney Darrell Jones, chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition. You and Barbara Arnwine and the Transformative Justice Coalition team, and of course, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, chair of Rainbow Push. She's opening up her personal law office. Uh, of course, President Gerald Griggs, president of the state NAACP of Georgia. So many of you are heading to Georgia, and you're telling us to watch out, and particularly the swing states, but it just seems like, with hurricanes Milton and Helene, it's like there's just a lot on the plate. So let me just start there. Why Georgia? Why is Georgia such a focus this year? And I remind people, October 21st at Rainbow Push, we will have we will be hosting with the filmmaker himself, with Greg Palast, the Vigilantes Inc. movie. We're going to have some little sneaky snacks, but we're going to really have a conversation about the vote. I think it's important. We think that it's important. Daryl and Barbara Arnwine and Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Greg Palast, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jamie Foxx, all these people were all working with each other, really, more or less to try and get the vote out there. I mean, and to help people understand how important it is. Why is so much of your attention being focused on Georgia?
A lot of attention is focused on Georgia because Georgia really has been the eye of the storm when it comes to voter suppression. Everything that's going on in the state of Georgia and with voting suppression around the country, somehow it finds its root in Georgia and a lot of what's happening in Georgia. And what I mean by that, Santita, is that when we look at, when we were in Georgia in 2020, and we were giving out food and water to people that were waiting in line to vote.
Now, is that legal? Can you?
At that time, it was legal. And what had happened, and this is why I call Georgia the eye of the storm. What Georgia had done was that it closed polling places in Black and brown communities where they thought they were going to be Democratic voters. They closed polling places to consolidate them so that people that had access to polling places that were close to where they live would not have that access and would have to travel a distance to go to vote at their polling place. Once they got to closing the polling places and consolidating some of these polling places in Black and brown communities, what it had the effect of doing was creating long lines of people that are now there waiting to vote at these polling places. So what would you think would be the normal thing to do if you were really trying to help folks? You'd add more machines. Well, they didn't do that. They didn't add more voting machines. In fact, in some places, they took away voting machines. They wanted to make it more difficult for folks to be able to access that right to vote. That meant that you had to wait in line 3 or 4 hours in order to be able to cast your vote. Well, as you opened up, Santita, saying, if you're a working person and you don't have 3 or 4 hours to stand in line to cast a ballot, to wait to be able to cast a ballot, that creates issues. If you're in line 2 or 3 hours and you haven't eaten, we would come along and offer you, some pizza. We'd offer you some food. We'd offer you some water, whatever you needed just to stay in line. We also, us, Andy. We also have a DJ that's playing some music to let you go do a line dance while you're there. Anything to keep you in line, to keep you, in place to exercise that right to vote. Well, what subsequently happened is that Rappersberger, the Secretary of State for Georgia, saw what we were doing. This wasn't in necessarily just downtown Atlanta or places like that. We were out in the rural areas where there were Black voters that were being encouraged doing this, and where there were food insecurities, encouraging them to eat, to stand in line, and to vote. Well, what Rappersberger subsequently did is, once he saw that we were giving out water and that we were giving out pizza or different foods and stuff to people that are waiting in line to vote, he then issued a statement saying that it's now illegal for you to do this, for you to give people that are in line water, to give people that are in line a snack, give people in line to vote anything. And that if he caught anyone, given anyone in line, and let me get the quote right, as much as a cup of coffee, that he would then call that voter interference and make it illegal and have us arrested. Black Voters Matter was doing the same thing that we were doing as well. They were, they had, I think they were calling it at that point the collard green circuit, right? Where they were giving away collard greens and everything else to people that are in line in these areas to vote. Well, that's what Rappersberger decided that he was going to do, to try to further intimidate us from being able to do that. Well, this is part of the reason we concentrate on Georgia, is because we understand the effort that is there to try to keep the Black and brown and the young voter from exercising that right to vote. Now, fast forwarding on our story from 2020, that didn't stop us from doing what we were doing with regards to having music, giving out food, and everything else that we were doing. Because the law says that you had to be, I think it was like 125 feet away from the polling area, and then you weren't interfering at all. So we just moved everything so we were 125 feet away and still had the party, and told people they had to come over to get something if they wanted to get something. But we say all that and we do all that because it's so important that we stand up for that right to vote, and we encourage people to be able to be able to vote. Georgia becomes so important because of the electoral college and the number of votes that are there. It becomes so important because I call it the three areas that we need to be concerned with in this particular election cycle. The first area deals with the access to being able to vote. That is, being able to receive your absentee ballot and not have it interfere with, not have the postal service mess with it, being able to get to a drop box. Georgia now has changed that, so you don't have 24-hour access to the drop box. So I mean, we're seeing all these issues coming up. They have cameras at the drop boxes. You know, all of this is going on, but that's the access part of the vote. The second part of that we will then start seeing after we have the access and people trying to get to the place to be able to vote, whether they're being challenged, as to their addresses where they live or any of this other stuff. Once we get past the point of actually having access and people voting, the second challenge that we're going to be dealing with is going to be dealing with the count. With the counting the ballots, because what is happening? We're having all these challenges that are going to be coming as to what the count should be, what ballots should be counted, how should they be counted, and we're seeing Georgia and some of the other legislatures that are dealing with that as well. The third leg of this will, after the count of the ballots of the votes that are there, will be the certification process. Each state has got to certify its own election results. And what we've seen, particularly with the state of Georgia, is that they are now allowing the legislature to determine who should sit to be the certifiers, those that are going to be the electors that will cast the vote for the state. The General Assembly is involved in that, which is a Republican conservative General Assembly. So those are three of the areas that that we've got to be concerned about. Right now, we're in this first phase of accessing the vote and trying to be certain that every vote that is available gets everyone that has that opportunity to be able to vote, and that's going to be a real fight. We haven't even talked about those with disabilities and what Alabama and some of the other states are trying to do with that.
No, let's talk about that, because I'm also thinking about, as we tell people to plan the vote, I'm throwing a lot at you, and you're going to have you back over really regularly over the next few days. Because all of these things, when you start talking about this, things start coming up. Like, okay, you say plan the vote. People are saying, okay, vote early. Say can you go with a group of friends to vote?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you need to go to the restroom, or you're not feeling well, you need to sit down off to the side, can someone hold your place in the line? Is that allowed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And someone can hold your place in line for you to be able to vote. Now, it can't be a situation where, I'll hold your line if you vote for X or if you vote for Y, or, whatever issue. But there's no problem with someone holding a place, being a placeholder for you in line. In fact, that's one of the things we did in the state of Georgia when they created those 3 and 4 hour waits, long lines.
Yeah.
We would have our young folks, right, our Gen Zs that came in from everywhere. They would go and be placeholders for some of the seniors that were there. So the senior didn't have to stand for 4 hours. They didn't have to stand for 2 hours. They didn't have to stand for an hour. And they could be on the side, seated and resting. And then as they got closer, they could come on out and take their place and move on in. And that was completely legal.
What about those who, if literacy is a struggle for you, if English as a first language is a struggle, if you struggle with the language, and a lot of us do. Some of us are native born speakers of American English, and it's a struggle. Reading is a struggle. You could be dyslexic. You could be functionally illiterate. There's no shame in any of it. What do you do? Can you bring someone with you? I mean, how do you establish that you have the issue that you say that you have? Can someone go into the poll with you to help you? And how do you establish that? How do you make your case to the judges?
Right. So anyone can go in the poll with you to assist you in voting. Anyone. can
It
go
is.
with you to assist you in your voting. And the election judge and election officials, they should not be questioning you. They cannot question you as to whether or not you need the person, as to whether or not you can really read the English language, as to whether or not you need help for whatever reason, physical assistance in casting. You can't see. You have arthritis in your hands, so you can't hold what if it requires holding a pen or a pencil or whatever it may be. You may be intimidated by technology, and there may be something that's all electronic in your voting booth. Whoever you need, you can bring with you to be able to vote. That you can do. That's guaranteed under the Voting Rights Act that gives you the ability. The same with people with physical disabilities, right? If you have a physical disability, they've got to make access to you for you at the polling place for you to be able to vote. If you need someone to go with you, you can take someone with you. If you want the election judge to go with you, he or she can go with you. Whatever it takes for you to be able to cast your vote and feel comfortable doing it, you're permitted to do it under the Voting Rights Act. So yes, Santita, there is no limitation as to who can be with you when you go to cast your ballot, as long as they're not, doing it for you, thinking for you, or overriding your decision or deciding for you who you're voting for.
We're talking with Attorney Darrell Jones, Chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition, about your vote. What about people? We've had Hannah, who's in South Carolina, the hurricanes that have impacted at least 6 states. You still have people who are without power. Um, Much cell phone service has been restored, but people don't have a place to live, and they don't have any identification. And in increasing numbers of these states and areas, you need to have identification. What do you do?
Yeah, a lot of the states, and North Carolina is one of the states that had done it actually with their initial legislation that they passed. That's now being implemented this election cycle. Is that if you don't have the identification, you lost your state ID, so you don't have what you need. You lost everything. You had to get out of the house, so you don't have a bill or anything with your address on it. They are supposed to and should have for you affidavits that you can sign saying that I'm affirming that this is where I live, that this is my address, and that I ordinarily would be voting at such and such a place that is designed for me at my address. And by having that affidavit, you can sign that, and that should be sufficient for you to be able to cast your ballot. A lot of things that are happening though is that people don't know. You don't know. What you have heard is that you need identification to vote. What you haven't heard, particularly if you don't have access to any type of electricity or anything, that all of a sudden you can do this by affidavit. You don't have to have your ID. How do you find that information out if you don't have electricity and you've lost everything? How do you find that out? So that becomes one of the challenges. One of the things they're doing in the state of North Carolina is that for 13 of the 100 counties that were most impacted, is that they're allowing folks from those 13 counties to be able to vote wherever they find themselves. If they can find a polling place, they can cast their ballot wherever they are. Out of precinct voting is what we call it. So they're allowing folks that were displaced because of the storm to be able to vote outside of their precinct without question. So they'll be able to have their votes still cast and counted in that North Carolina election, and that's really huge. But again, it's one of those things that people have got to be made aware of what they can do and what's available to them, because where situations tend to fall the most is on the notification side of letting voters know, of letting citizens know what their rights are and what they're able to do, particularly if they've changed because of a natural disaster.
Well, and it is a natural disaster because a lot is happening everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
right? My question for you now, because of what happens when, if you have an emergency, if there's a death in the family?
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm pulling these questions not out of the air, but out of our life experiences. A lot of things happen. We were campaigning in Milwaukee about 3 weeks ago, and one gentleman said, my taxi driver had a family issue that that was pressing, and he said, I'm not going to be here on election day. and he didn't know what to do. And I said, well, first you need to call, your local election board. I gave him vote.org. I gave him
Mhm.
1-866 our vote. But he did not know what to do. And I said, can you vote early? I said, let's find out when early voting starts here. He was going to miss that window. If you're going to miss these windows, what do you do?
Well, Santita,
I mean,
this is
because
where
if
we
you're going
start
to have a
talking.
mail-in ballot, don't they need to mail it to you, or do you go pick it up?
Right. You can pick up an absentee ballot. You can go to your local board of election and pick up an absentee ballot to be able, and they can go through everything with you, so you have the ability to vote. But there's still a window that's there for you to be able to do all of that, and that's part of the reason we tell people constantly to make a voting plan, right? Know in advance how you're going to exercise your right to vote, and then exercise the plan that you've put in place. Because the scariest thing for a voter to do, in my estimation, is to wait till election day to decide I'm going now to vote. And they go to where they've gone to for the last 25 years to vote, only to find out their polling place has been moved. Where you are is not where you're supposed to be, and you're on your lunch hour. So now what are you going to do? You're stuck. And so that's why we constantly encourage people to go to that vote.org, find out, number one, that you haven't been removed from the voter rolls. Number two, where am I supposed to vote? What is the place? What are the times that I'm supposed to vote? Why do I say what are the times? In the state of Georgia, you have vacillating times based on where you are in the state. It's not the same voting hours
No.
everywhere.
See, this is where our voting rights and having a constitutional amendment that will guarantee voting rights is necessary, because that means everybody doesn't have equal access to the vote, to me, just as a layperson.
Mhm.
So my question is, what are you supposed to do? I mean, because so much is happening now. I mean, look, Hurricanes Milton and Helene could easily have happened on election day.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we still don't know what's going to happen
Right.
as we approach the elections. We don't know. And what if explain how people are challenging your vote and having you stricken from the rolls?
Mhm.
And what do you
Mhm.
do if you've gone to vote.org and up until election day or thereabouts, you have been on the rolls? What if you get to the polls and find out that you're no longer on the rolls,
Mhm.
but you were last week, a couple of days ago, even yesterday?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's a very frustrating thing when I think Greg Palast tells a great story in Vigilante Inc.,
Mhm.
where he's interviewing Dr. King's first cousin, who's like
Yeah.
92 or so years old, and she's been voting ever since she's been eligible to vote, always voting in the same place, always voting, living in the same home, and she goes to vote during the election cycle, and she's told that she's been removed, she's been purged, she's gone, she can't vote. I think the terminology she used there, she's dead and gone. The only thing is she's still standing on top of the earth. Well, those are the things that we've got to be concerned with during this election cycle. And so when we talk about, you're going to the you're going to vote to your polling place, and you learn that you've been challenged, meaning that someone has challenged your ability to vote, saying that you don't live where you say you lived, and therefore don't let Jake Smith vote because he doesn't live where he says he lives. And what they've done, just to tee this up very nicely, and Greg Pallas's Vigilante, is that they looked at last names, and they looked at last names that they thought were most common for African Americans or Spanish surnames, right? Spanish surnames, Rodriguez, Hernandez, and all that similarity. And they said, these are the ones we're challenging. And now they don't challenge them by going down to the election board of election to say, I challenge this one, I challenge that one. What they've now been able to do is that they do it electronically. So they're able to go through just on the computer. And at one point, it's like 10 or 20,000 people that one person challenged with the click of the mouse of saying, I challenge all of these folks. At that
Who's
point,
doing this? Who's doing it? Who's doing this?
there are some organizations. One I believe is out of Texas that's involved, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to shorten, lessen the voter pool of actual voters that have access to be able to vote, so that they can increase their opportunities and their chances of winning, particularly on the conservative side. So when you have these, and there are a lot of several of the organizations that are involved in this voter targeting and purging and challenging Black and brown voters from being able to access the poll. But as this is occurring, what happens is you get to the poll and you find out you've been challenged. Well, let's say this is election day, right? This is the election day, and you're now going to the vote, going to the polling place to be able to cast your vote, and you found out that you've been challenged. What's required? Well, now you've got to prove that you live where you say you lived. And it may require one or two, it may require two pieces of identification with your address on it. So you'll need to have your oil bill, your heating bill, your electric bill, your telephone bill, or something that goes to that address to show that you live where you're saying that you live, in order to overcome the challenge that's been posed against you. If you don't have that information, then you've got to go back home to get it. And if you're in one of those situations where you just don't have time to travel to go back, or if you're in a situation like I spoke about in 2020, where they made a line 2 hours or an hour long for you to be able to access the ability to vote, you may be back in the end of that line. And the question is, do you have the time to do that? And that's part of the reason that we encourage people so much to be certain that you go to thevote.org, but also plan your vote out. And try to, I encourage people to not wait until election day to do it. Do it in advance, because if there turns out that there's a problem with your absentee ballot, or if there's a problem with you being challenged, it gives you the opportunity to correct all of that.
But what are some of give me 2 or 3 like things that the unexpecteds. I've told the story so many times, but I think it chilled me to my bone marrow, going to the polling place where I have been going for more than a decade, and having people who know me and who know my whole family, because we grew up with my brothers, my sister. Well, my sister is teaching at university in Japan. Hey, Jackie, today. We all live in the same neighborhood. We all have the same zip code. So, I mean, I'm just saying, these are people, and we have lived over here for more than 50 years. We went away to college and all of that. I got it. But, my point is, everybody knows us here. And when this man told me that, oh, you voted at 6:06 this morning. Well, I wasn't here at 6:06, because I'm not going to roll out of bed and just walk to the polling place. I'm going to come in looking like this. and it became a thing. It took me an hour to vote. And that was really unsettling for me, because I had to push and press not to vote on a provisional ballot. And these are with people who know me, Daryl. What are just give me 2 or 3 things that people bump into, like roadblocks that folks bump into, and walk me through how you're supposed to handle that. Because all this stuff is academic until it happens to you.
Absolutely. It's academic until it happens to you. One of the things that people run into, and you've got to be careful, because again, this is a state by state issue, because states control the vote. Is you've got to be certain that if your state requires you to have the identification, that you have identification with you. and that you have the proper type of identification with you. It may, driver's license generally are accepted everywhere, but a college identification isn't accepted everywhere, isn't automatic. So you got to be certain you have the proper type of identification. That's one of the big things. One of the other things within identification that's very common, Santita, is that you've got to be certain that your identification is current, right? That it can't be expired. You can't come with an expired ID, an
That
expired
happened to
license.
me. Wait a minute, Daryl. That happened to me. My identification had expired like 2 weeks before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because you can get caught up in. I'm sorry, you guys. Hey, I got caught up in the business of life. Oh yeah, I'm going to get it renewed. Oh yeah, I'm going to get it renewed. I am at some place, and they said, Miss Jackson, by the way, this is expired. I'm gonna let you go because they, sometimes people exercise discretion,
Right.
and I wasn't voting; it was something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, like, right in through here. I mean, and now it's much harder to get your ID because of COVID. They're still saying it's harder to get things renewed. It's still hard to order parts for your refrigerator, for
Mm-hmm.
example. So my question is, okay, so what do you do?
So if your identification is expired, then you need to have some other form of identification in order for you to be able to vote. And, you could try to use your utility bill. You could try to use something to show your address. Generally, you got to have something that has your picture on it to
What if
show
you
that
had
you.
a fire? What if you've had a fire? I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you.
Yeah. Well, with the if you've had a fire in your home, right? So it's not a natural disaster, but something that is specific only to you. Then it varies state by state, but generally they'll have some type of affidavit for you to fill out with regards to your identification, so that you would still be able to access that right to vote. In the very worst case scenario, they'll have you do a provisional ballot, so that and you'll be able to match it up at a different point in time, so that your provisional ballot will be able to be counted. That's your worst case scenario is the provisional ballot. One of the other things, excuse me, Santita, one of the other things that we have found to happen, because we do command centers, right? The Transformative Justice Coalition, we generally have command centers in different parts of the country to monitor issues that are going on when people are voting. One of the things in one of the last elections, I think it was 2020 or 2022, that occurred was in Minnesota of all places, right? A small town in Minnesota, where the local board of elections there, where people were coming to cast their ballot, and it had a large Spanish-speaking population. They were requiring them to read an oath with regards to them casting a ballot. Their oath that they're able to vote, that they're a U.S. citizen, and all this other stuff. That was in English. That was only in English. You can't do that. That's a literacy test. That's precisely what this is. It's a literacy test. And the concept was to dissuade and make it more difficult for our Latino brothers and sisters to be able to cast that ballot. Those were some of the issues. These are small areas, small counties where this occurs. So you're not going to hear about it on MSNBC. You're not going to hear about it on CNN, but it's going to have its desired impact in suppressing the vote from members of that community, because once they know they have to be able to read English and read this oath in English before they can cast the ballot, they're not going to do it, particularly if they don't think they're proficient in the language. Which brings us to one of the other points that you had raised a little earlier. Wherever you are in the United States, you have the right to bring someone with you to assist you to vote. If German is your language and you don't speak English well, and you can bring an interpreter with you can bring your grandson, your granddaughter, whoever with you that you trust to interpret the information that you're reading. Because it's not just about Vice President Kamala Harris or former President Donald Trump. There are generally other constitutional issues that are on these ballots, and they can be long and wordy, and you've got to be able to comprehend it. So you may need someone there with you to explain it to you, because your English isn't that strong. Your literacy isn't that strong. You have the right to have that occur and have that available with you because of the Voting Rights Act that as it's been amended, so that is there. And there's certain areas, Santita, where if they're, and I don't recall the exact threshold, but there's a threshold where if there's a certain percentage of folks that speak French that are in the community, that they're going to be required to have offer French as an option that's on the ballot for you to be able to be certain that you understand what it is that you're reading and what it is that you're voting on.
What else should we be watching out for? I guess, I didn't realize getting stricken from the voter rolls is much more prevalent than we know. One of the regulars on our show is Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds. He's head of the Black Legislative Caucus, very prominent in Texas state politics. 1 million, more than 1 million voters have been stricken from the voter rolls in Texas alone.
Mm-hmm.
In Texas alone, Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, how many hundreds of thousands?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is happening routinely all over the country. So, I mean, I want to get the word out. Carol and Jarvis and Mike and Renee, because Sweet Pea, because wait a minute, you're taking your 74-year-old mom to City Hall to vote early and hopefully avoid trouble. That's the right place to go, Sweet Pea. 3051. You helped her last year since she has limited mobility. We're bringing our passports and energy bill and tax bill this year. Because now our father has trouble writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in fact, there's a photo of Congressman Jackson, my brother Jonathan, and we were coming into the polling booth, and I was just standing off to the side, but Jonathan was helping him, and my father was like, here, because his hands, have his mobility's been impacted by Parkinson's. But praise the Lord, he's doing well, everybody. Thank you for your prayers. But some people might say, okay, you all are well known, blah, 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 blah. But that's legal. Right? Because also my father's a big guy. He's still a big guy. So you need someone to help navigate the wheelchair and someone else to be in front to make sure the path is smooth. Because of course we don't want him to fall from the wheelchair. I'm saying there's some people who need help, who need assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's separate and apart from how prevalent it is that people are being stricken from these voter rolls. And that's why I think people are going to be faced with this much more frequently than we know.
Mm-hmm.
Because if 1 million people have been stricken from the rolls in Texas alone, all it takes is a county, a ward here, a ward there, a county here, a county there. In an election where everyone is saying that it's going to be tighter than this.
Mm-hmm.
That is what concerns me, Daryl.
Yeah.
That this is going to be such a tight election. Tight. And I don't know if we're paying sufficient attention. How often should you be checking whether you're on the voter rolls? Because was it you or someone who said you could be stricken from the voter rolls the day of the election?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds crazy to me.
Yeah, you've got to check. We're at a point now because we're within the 90-day window of an election that the registers of elections should not be purging people from election rolls. The election judges should not be purging people. The key words there are should not. Okay, because we've already seen it happen. And they had to restore those people. But, let's just be clear that you need to continually check to be certain that you have not been purged from the rolls, and if the ability is there to be able to check to see if there's been any type of challenge that's been placed against you. You can be challenged all the way up to the time you go to cast your ballot. You can be challenged while you're standing in line to cast your ballot.
Me. So if you're challenged while you're standing in line, because I don't put anything past these people, what do you do?
So that's why I tell folks, if you have some type of identification with you, you can prove your address. You can prove that's the most important thing, is that you've just got to prove what your address is.
Is that a bill?
That you're living where you say that you live.
Can that be a utility bill?
A utility bill can do it. A driver's license can do it. Anything that has your current address on it to show that you're John Smith and this is where you live, that this is your address.
So a
That's what you
passport
need to.
won't do it. Passport won't do it. State ID will. Or
If the passport has your address on it, your current address on it, that should be sufficient. That should be sufficient. The question is your ability to show that you live where you say that you live, that things are there with your address that's on it. That's the most important thing. And again, when you're bringing up all of the challenges that are going to be going on, all of the you got to remember, we're anticipating that some of the hottest polling places, probably all through Georgia for the most part, there's also going to be some type of intimidation that's going to be going on in some of these polling places, where they're going to try to, and that one of the first folks that you were just mentioned that was taking her mom to City Hall to be able to vote because they thought they would be more secure, they feel safer there. Well, if you're feeling more secure and more safer, that means that you're feeling intimidated some type of way, that there's something out there that you're concerned about going out there on your own, allowing your mom to go out on her own to be able to cast her ballot. That's voter intimidation, and that's illegal. That's illegal in every state across this country. That's illegal. And that you need to report it to the election judge. You need to report it to the 866, our vote line. You need to report it because it's not just you that it's happening to, but it's other people as well.
Finally, what if you find that if you on election day, see, I'm expecting mischief, or should I say, I want to be prepared for mischief on election day, because that is when most of us will vote, and that is when you don't expect it. I mean, you expect to be. I mean, because you walk into the polling station, and you think everything is fine. And everything was fine until you get to the election judge and someone challenges you. What do you do if you find that you have been challenged? If you're challenged, what do you do if you're not? If they say, because I moved, and when I voted here in March, it took them a minute to find me. I said, well, look, I've got re-registered. I had some piece of paper. They were like, but no, that's not what you need. I said, but you've sent this to me. And I said, you've told me this is where I need to come to vote. This is from the Board of Elections. What else do I need? I mean, this is the card that you said that says you're voting Santita Jackson. You're voting here in precinct, whatever, ward, such and such. I'm here. Find me. It took them a long time to find me. Well, it felt like a long time to me. Maybe it was about 10 or 15 minutes. But for me, that felt like a long time because I was like, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not here. What did I do? Because I had sent it in.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things where you have not felt anger. And I remember it was either Lexington or Louisville, Kentucky. And there was a soldier, elderly gentleman who had served in World War II, I believe, or one of the conflicts. And he went to vote, and they couldn't find him. He said, I voted in every election. And they said, well, we have 2 polling places in this one location. You're probably at the other polling location. So they sent him to the other end of the hall. And he's on a walker. So he goes to the other end of the hall. The other end of the hall says, we don't have you, sir. This isn't where you're voting. This isn't your place. What did they do? They had moved him. They told him that he had to go some 5 miles away from where he had been historically voting there and I apologize, I can't remember if it was Louisville or Lexington, Kentucky, to be able to cast his ballot. I can't tell you the anger that we all felt for him because he had not been notified of any of this. And so he had to figure out how he was going to get transportation to the other side of town so that he could exercise his right to vote. And, to hear him tell his story, that he served this country and that he did everything he could. He's done everything right so that he could have this right to vote. And he felt as though it's now trying to be taken from him, that they're playing games with his right to vote. Folks, this is the reason we encourage you to go to vote.org now, because not only will it tell you whether or not you're registered, it'll also tell you where you're supposed to go and vote, where they've moved your polling place to. Plan it out. Don't wait till election day. And Santita, if I may, folks, right now, many across the country are beginning to receive absentee ballots. Across overseas, they've already gotten their absentee ballots. When you get these absentee ballots and it's time to turn them in, don't get cute with it, right? Don't put "Go Kamala," "Go Dems," we got this.
Are you
That will
serious?
absolutely that cancels your ballot. So do not put any stray marks on the ballot at all. Any stray marks, none, no hearts, nothing, nothing. Sign it where it tells you to sign it. Be certain if it has an envelope that it's supposed to go into, that you put it into that envelope and you sign that envelope if it's required. As much as you may like saving the government money, don't put the whole family's vote ballot in the same envelope. Don't do it. Each ballot will have its own envelope. If you put them all in the same envelope, it will cancel all of them out.
Oh my God.
Use your own envelope.
What if you lose the envelope? I had to ask.
If you lose the envelope, the best thing for you to do is to go to the Board of Elections to return your ballot. That's the best thing for you to do.
I know I asked you a lot of questions, and I have yet even more questions because you don't think about these things until they happen to you, and because there is a movement that is anti-voting rights. Everybody, I think we need to be aware of what we're all up against. Don't be fooled. Poor white people up in them hills in North Carolina. They might not be thinking about voting, but some of them, as they come around to the depths of their struggles, they will want to vote, but will they be able to? That really is the question. And they're going to be asking these questions. And so, just know that while we are in this voting season, go to vote.org. Call 1-866-OUR-VOTE, vote.org. What do you find out there, Daryl?
You can find out all the information. You can find out where you're supposed to vote. Are you registered to vote? What are the hours that you can vote in your designated place? Like I said, in the state of Georgia, the hours vary. Not everyone doesn't have the same hours there. So be certain that you know what the hours are of your polling place. Be certain that you know where you're going to vote. And all of this is available at vote.org. If you are a person that's been impacted by the court system, you have an F on your record, as they say, a felony on your record from the criminal justice system, vote.org will tell you whether or not you have the right to vote in your state, because it varies state by state. Illinois is like Maryland. If your feet are in the street, you can vote, period. Parole, probation, doesn't make a difference. If your feet are in the street, you can vote. Other states like Florida, for instance, you have to pay your fines, fees, and restitution before you regain that right to vote. If you go to vote.org, it'll provide that information for you. There are 3 states in the union that do it the way, Santita, that your father, you, and I believe it should be done, and that's in Vermont, as well as in DC and Maine, and that is that you never lose your right to vote. You always have your right to vote. Once you have registered and you're there and you're 18, you have attained the right, you never lose that right, even if you're incarcerated. That's the way it should be, folks. That once you have that right to vote, I don't think it should ever be tampered with. I don't think you should ever lose your right to cast a ballot.
And the only reason they have these obstacles is because they don't want you to. The power structure does not want you to be able to vote. The oligarchs, yes, because we traded in the monarchs for the oligarchs. And the powers that be are always supposed to be able to vote. But the fact is, you are the power. You have the power. These people are allowed to lord over us because we're allowing it. Your vote is your voice. Please remember that and track down in a good way, the Transformative Justice Coalition. They will be in Georgia, but there are people who are working to help you secure your vote all over the country. 1-866-OUR-VOTE. If you are doing early voting, please call them should you have any trouble, or if you see any trouble at the polls, call and go to vote.org so you can find the who, the what, the when, the where, and try to find out who's running, because don't play with your vote. You should know who the judges are, at least know some of the judges you want to vote for. Yeah, this is a big, big election. They always are. They have tremendous consequence. They're of tremendous consequence. So please, everybody, get out there and vote, 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 because your life and your neighbor's life and everybody's life, we all depend upon it. We really, really do. Sending you so much love, Attorney Daryl Jones. Sending my morning stars and everybody, Yvonne and all of you. Sending you all so much love. Please get out there and vote, everybody. Get out there and vote. I will see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. And if you're going to be in Detroit, look out for me because I'm heading there. We're going to go vote. We are going to stump for Kamala Harris. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. But for my Trumpsters who are out there, please get out there and vote. Get out there and vote. I support that. If you're voting for Cornel West, I support that. If you're voting for Claudia Dela Cruz, the Libertarians, just vote. Vote, 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 vote. I've made my choice. I will fight for your right to be free enough to make your choice. What we all need is an open pathway to the vote. Whomever we're going to vote for. That really is the key. And I'm going to fight for that right for each one of us, no matter whom you're voting for. That's really the key. Sending you all so much love. Sending you love. Attorney Daryl Jones, the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, in the voice of progressive ministry.